Hello, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. We've got Week 15 quarterback and tight end rankings. I'm Chris Welsh, joined by Pat Fitzmaurice and Scott Pianowski. We're going through both positions. We're looking at 1 through 12 at each spot, maybe poking around at some outside of the top 12, some debates that are in there. If you guys have questions on the ranks that maybe we won't get to, or you want to see how they evolve throughout the week, go to fantasypros.com/rankings, where we have got the expert consensus rankings of 150, 60, 70, whatever it is, every single week. Can kind of adjust maybe as the season goes on, but every single day these are adjusting as more ranks are put in, and you can get the expert takes, and you can kind of look through if you want to pick and choose between some expert rankers. Gentlemen, let's start with the quarterback ranks. Let's just jump right into it. Obviously, this is going to be very, very important. There's some chalk, but then there's also some questions, and those people out there in these fantasy matchups are poking around at some big questions at quarterbacks, because I feel like we've only gotten to the space where there's like 7 safe quarterbacks and people are trying to see, should I start Jameis Winston over really big guys? Jalen Hurts last week, they were trying to get us with Fitz, Lamar Jackson. People want to tinker with quarterbacks. So let's discuss that. The big quarterback rank board, Josh Allen's number 1. Lamar Jackson's at 2. We got Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. That's your top 5. 2 is at 6. Sam Darnold at 7. Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, Jared Goff, and Justin Herbert. That's your top 12. I want to ask one quick question, Fitz. That in the world of tinkering, we said this in a previous episode that we all did together. Pianowski mentioned it, where people will say, hey, you start your studs and don't think about it, blah, blah, blah. Do you think there's a line at quarterback right now where people should not be tinkering? We kind of went right at somebody on that. We have a new show on YouTube, Out of Bounds, that they were thinking about, should I go Jameis over Lamar? And it was like, just don't overthink that. That's not the question. But like, what do you think the quarterback line is right now where you could start considering tinkering? Like, is it the top 5, Hurts, Daniels, Burrow, Jackson, Allen, those you don't even question? And then you could start maybe tinkering with high volume guys over like a Darnold or a Murray or something like that. What's your take on it?
I think those 5, that's a good cutoff. Those are the set it and forget it guys. And then the next 2 for me are Tua and Darnold. Like, it would take a lot for me to pull either of those guys out of my starting lineup at this point.
Okay, so not even though, too cute.
Yeah, and Tua and Darnold don't have the best matchups. I mean, Darnold goes against the Bears, who are much better against the pass than they are against the run. Tua goes against the Texans, not an easy defense to face, but I feel pretty good about both of those guys.
Scott, what do you think? Same thing. I know, like you said this also in another previous show, that you are much more willing to bench name branded players, like big named guys, if it suits on the matchups. But like, what's the line at quarterback? Because I feel like this is the spot where people really want to manipulate and analyze and get cute with.
Yeah, I think my lines of demarcation were similar to what Pat said, where the top 5 don't even ask me. And then if you ask me about Tua and Darnold because of the matchups, I'd say I understand why you're asking, but you're still playing Tua and you're still playing Darnold. And then it's like, okay, what do I do with Purdy? What do I do with Nix? I never know what to do with Kyler Murray. How much help does Justin Herbert have? Mayfield is a little bit of that Winston type where he makes some splash throws and he throws some to the other guys every week. Goff does a lot of handing off. Patrick Mahomes, we've been saying for over a year now, why isn't he producing like the Patrick Mahomes we're used to? Those are all discussions we have to have. What's happened to CJ Stroud? What's happened to Jordan Love? Can we trust Anthony Richardson? Can we trust Aaron Rodgers? On and on it goes. So I feel like we have 5 unbelievable locks that you feel thrilled that they're on your roster. Tua and Darnold make up a very sturdy B+ tier, and I think everything else is in play.
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of wiggle room anymore. So let's talk about a couple of these quarterbacks here. Bo Nix, one of my favorites this week, if I'm being honest. He comes in at ECR 9. You guys both have him in this general vicinity, but what I like the conversation around him is he's just outside of that super crazy comfort line that you guys talked about, where it's like it's going to take a lot for Darnold or Tua to come off of that roster. Bo Nix, coming off of the bye, is going up against Indianapolis. I'm very pro Bo Nix if you watch some of the shows, but Scott, you've got him at QB 9 this week. So your take on getting Bo Nix in those starting lineups?
I like Nix. I'm a big Cortland Sutton guy. I'm a Sean Payton believer in the passing game. I just wish the Bo Nix who ran aggressively and have goal line equity would come back, because he hasn't been that player over the last 4 weeks. And I do think we talked on the running back show how difficult it is to land on a Denver running back you can trust. And that is true. I feel like somebody's going to run against the Colts, though. Teams have run against the Colts all year. So this feels like a Knicks game where he throws for 245 yards, probably 2 touchdowns, won't have a ton of rushing production, won't have a rushing touchdown, and he'll be like quarterback 13, quarterback 11, quarterback 15. He'll be perfectly fine. I just don't think the ceiling that we were excited about with Bo Nix a few weeks ago, I don't think that's present in this matchup.
So I'm going to actually put 2 quarterbacks together here because I think this is really fascinating, because when I say what are those lines, where you'll start to play volume. Jameis Winston, by the way, he's the example. He's the player that really always comes up in the question, but there's not a lot of other guys. It's usually, hey, Jameis Winston throws 48 times a game. There's volume. Do I play him over? Bop, bop, bop. Fitz, and we'll come back to you on Winston, Scott, but Fitz, I specifically bring this up because you are very high on Jameis Winston this week. You have Winston one spot above Bo Nix. So Bo Nix is like, hey, I'm this line of like, I'm one of the top guys after the I don't even think about it players. Yet Jameis Winston is one you are jumping over him. So Nix versus Winston.
Yeah. And what Scott said about Bo Nix's curtailed running. Over the first 9 weeks of the season, Nix averaged 6.4 rushing attempts a game and 32.8 rushing yards. And he had 4 touchdown runs over those first 9 games. Over his last 4 games, 9 rushing attempts, 9 yards, no touchdowns. So yeah, that's on the other hand, like his passing has, he's become more productive as a passer, like multiple touchdown passes in 6 of his last 9 games. He's thrown for at least 273 yards in each of his last 3. So that's good. But yeah, we don't have quite the ceiling that we did before. Meanwhile, Jameis Winston, he has averaged 43.2 pass attempts over his 6 starts. He has thrown 41 pass attempts or more in all but one of those games, averaging 315 passing yards, 2 touchdown passes a game. Yeah, it's a tough matchup against Kansas City this week, but you can't run on the Chiefs. How do you think the Browns are going to try to move the ball against the Chiefs? They're going to let Jameis throw it 48 times this week. And yeah, maybe he has like 3 pick sixes mixed in there, but they're going to keep letting that dude throw it around the yard. And like, unless your league is severely penal for interceptions and pick sixes, I want that passing yardage and the TD potential with Jameis Winston. Like, I can't believe his ECR is QB 18 or whatever it is. Like, are you not seeing this guy like throw it every snap on offense practically? Like,
well, that's the question then, because Scott, you've got him pretty low. I don't know if you made any rank adjustment, but you've got him around that ECR range. So you guys are like on the opposite ends of the rank side of Jameis Winston, but it's tough. And that is a really tough defense. Like, yeah, you can't run, but like, can you also throw? Can you be efficient? What's your take on Jameis Winston with your much lower rank?
Yeah, I have bumped him up to QB 16. I realize that doesn't match the enthusiasm that Pat was giving, but you have to look at the shape of this offense, right? I mean, most games they seem to junk the running game. Nick Chubb is a compromised player this season, which is no fun to say because we all love Nick Chubb. And Winston has receivers, pass catchers who can elevate him. I mean, Judy can make yards after the catch. Elijah Moore has been productive the last few weeks. David Njoku is one of the best tight ends. We'll see if they get Tillman back this week. So I feel like whatever Cleveland does do against a good Kansas City defense will be through the air. It's just a matter of how much does he give back. There's going to be at least 1 interception, maybe 2, maybe a fumble. So there's always, you're pouring water into the Winston bucket. There's a hole in that bucket. Some of it's going to leak out. That's part of the game. And you have to play to your scoring system. I just to give you an idea, I have him over Jordan Love. I have him over Anthony Richardson. I have him over Aaron Rodgers, Drake May. I don't really know what to do with Matthew Stafford. Him and Winston will be a call I would probably make very close to kickoff on Thursday. Of course, Stafford's tied to 2 really good receivers, so that helps him out, but no rushing component at all. And a lot of times Williams is going to steal the touchdowns. But so Winston, it's a cheap thing to say, oh, he's a really good quarterback too. In most leagues, people only start 1 quarterback, and I think you probably have somebody better than Winston. The good news is you'll want to use him next week against Cincinnati.
Oh boy, after watching Cincinnati, 100%. One last quarterback question, because again, our hyper focus is on like the top 12 guys, is Justin Herbert. So I do find this one difficult. It's a good matchup. We want to know the health of Ladd, obviously. Their running game is kind of black right now. Herbert comes in at 12, and you guys are on opposite ends. So, Scott, let's go back to you because you are the high man. So it's like what you guys have done is you've essentially flipped where your version of Winston is Herbert, or you guys are just on the opposite ends where you have Herbert, Fitz has Winston, and then the opposite end of you're really low and Fitz is really low on Herbert. So talk to us about Herbert in this Tampa Bay matchup.
Yeah, I'm going to need to get good news on McConkey because if I don't, I'm not going to want to play Herbert. But Tampa Bay's a team you can certainly throw on. And Herbert's a tough call because he's been really good for efficiency, but a lot of fantasy football is volume and opportunity. And the Chargers have just not played that way. Now, you would think they would lean more into the passing game with Dobbins hurt and with Gus Edwards just going nowhere. And I don't know when they're going to lean into Vidal as somebody they trust. It hasn't happened yet. But Herbert, if McConkey is a clear go, then I think Herbert is somebody you can play this week. And if he's not, even with the Tampa Bay matchup, I don't trust Quentin Johnson. I know he had a touchdown last week. Guys like Palmer, I feel like can disappoint at any time. Even Will Dissly, who was a useful tight end, is now hurt. We'll see if Smart can be a sleeper tight end for some people. But to me, it all comes down to McConkey. I'll have Herbert inside the top 12 and McConkey's a go. And if he's not, I'm going to have to push him into that non-startable range.
Fitz, is your rank with the assumption that McConkey is not playing or currently because he's questionable all, or are there just bigger concerns?
Kind of a hedge. I'm sort of that ranking is based on 50-50. I'll move him up a couple of spots if Ladd plays for sure. But not that high. Like for instance, in one of the leagues where I've got a wild card game this week, we have deep rosters. So everyone carries multiple quarterbacks. I'm carrying Brock Purdy and Justin Herbert. And ECR has Purdy at QB8 and Herbert QB12. So ECR does prefer Purdy, but maybe it's close enough where you would compare carefully before making a decision. For me, just a snap call with Purdy. Like Herbert is banged up. He's dealing with that leg injury after the big hit by Nick Bolton last week in the game against the Chiefs. And he's not going to have Will Dissly. And he may not have Ladd McConkey, and he's certainly not going to have 100% Ladd McConkey since Ladd is dealing with these knee and shoulder issues. Herbert is left with a pretty poor group of pass catchers if he doesn't have Ladd in this game, because we know Quentin Johnston is wildly undependable. Josh Palmer is kind of hit or miss. Jalen Reagor, Darius Davis. With Herbert playing on a bad wheel and with a depleted group of pass catchers, he's just not a guy I want to bet on.
You have two things fighting against each other in this game because Tampa Bay wants to play a shootout and the Chargers are one of those Steelers type teams. They want to play 17-13 football, and Jim Harbaugh wants to beat you with physicality and controlling the clock and with a very boring style that's been effective, and it's made the Chargers a playoff team. So what wins out? Does Tampa Bay get their carnival? Or do the Chargers play their boring, we're the first game to end in our window, which so often Charger games are? I mean, I'm curious to see which style of play wins out on Sunday.
Let's go over to the tight end ranks here. Your top 12 for the week, as per always. He's very chalky at the top. Brock Bowers at 1, Trey McBride at 2. I think that's just no-brainer. George Kittle at 3. Again, we're in no-brainer territory. Things start to open up a little bit. Travis Kelce, David Njoku rounds out your top 5. We've got Jonnu Smith, TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Tucker Kraft, Evan Ingram, and Pat Freiermuth. So the line starts to open up, I think, right after 7. Obviously, Andrews and Laporta have been a little bit better. The touchdown equity is up there. So that's, I think, where the tight end questions start to exist. So let's jump over to Tucker Kraft. There's an interesting one. Tight end 10. Scott's got him at 10. And Fitzy, you got him at 8. So talk to us about any optimism on Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, it's really hard to pin down target counts with the Green Bay pass catchers. It's just really wildly unpredictable week to week. And Matt LaFleur has talked about this, and he gets angry at press conferences when people ask him about the disappearances of pass catchers, such as, for instance, Jaden Reed, who had 1 target in that shootout game against the Lions last week. But Kraft has been a guy who Jordan Love has kind of leaned on, and he leans on him, especially when he gets close to the red zone. in the 10 games the Packers have played since Jordan Love came back from that early season knee injury, Kraft has 7 touchdowns in those 10 games. Like, he does seem to be the preferred red zone target for Jordan Love. And he's averaged a pretty respectable 44.4 yards per game over that 10 game stretch playing with Jordan Love. Yeah. So the touchdown upside here and a decent yardage floor, I think he's a pretty solid play here. Not one of the guys, obviously, you wish you had a no-brainer start like Brock Bowers or Trey McBride. But if you're one of those people who's kind of scraping by at tight end, I mean, I think Tucker Kraft looks pretty good in week 15.
Scott, if the top 4 guys are the first tier, Bowers, McBride, Kittle, even Kelsey, and you just like don't think about them, then there's that next tier where it's like Njoku, Jonnu, Hawkinson. Okay, great. Does Tucker Kraft belong in this third tier? Which I would say the third tier is the last of like, should I get crazy and stream? And that tier theoretically consists of Tucker Kraft, Evan Ingram, maybe Pat Freiermuth in there. Do you think Kraft is in that spot where, I know I created like 3 different tiers, but like the third tier is I'm not getting too cute unless I had some incredible matchup. I'm not starting a Juwan Johnson from last week or anybody like that he is trustworthy at 10, though he doesn't have the upside clearly of like, Hawkinson.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that he's that far from Hawkinson. In my revised ranks, I have Kraft more in line with Pat. I think he's a tight end 8 for me. And it's because not just of that touchdown equity, which is always going to be a huge part of any tight end question, but I love the way they use creatively Kraft, where he gets a lot of those tight end screens where the blockers are downfield, he catches it, and there's a 20-yard splash play waiting to happen. He's got 13.4 yards per catch, which is outstanding for a tight end. That's passable for a wide receiver. So in a year where the Green Bay the opportunities are splintered and Matt LaFleur is answering those questions he doesn't want to answer, or he's getting kind of surly about it because of Jaden Reed disappearing, or you never know what you're getting from Christian Watson, and Dobbs has been in and out of the lineup, and Wicks has been in and out of relevance. I actually feel like Kraft has a reasonable floor. The thing is, he's just never going to be peppered with targets. But this is the tight end position. We can live with 5 or 8 targets, goal line equity. Maybe he hits one of those screen plays for 20 yards. I feel pretty confident he'll be inside the top 10. If you have Tucker Kraft, if you landed on him, and I realize you may have picked him up and already had a good tight end, I feel like he's probably been locked into your lineup more often than not, and I'm totally fine with it. I will sleep like a baby with Tucker Kraft in my Week 15 lineup.
I have a lot of Tucker Kraft shares.
So I want to start him just for that cool kip up he did after the crushing hit he took last week against the Lions. That was very impressive.
I did not know what that was called.
I'm trying to think how long ago it was that I could actually do that.
Well,
maybe I was like 7 or 9 or 11.
My kids are both in dance, and I didn't know that move. If people know, it's like the thing you flip back up. I didn't know that was called a kip up until they were in dance, and now I've learned it. And all I could think about is like how difficult that had to be with a helmet and pads on. So yes, athletically very.
I didn't know it was called a kip up until Pat Fitzmaurice said it about 15 seconds ago.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Which goes to show you, I'm here for the Mary Tyler Moore references, not for the kip up references. Maybe Pat, of course, showing his ability to weave in between eras, which is why he's so great.
Like Mr. Welsh, I had a child in dance, so my daughter actually had to learn how to do that. So that
both of my kids are doing that all day, and I'm like, please stop it, please.
When these things when you're a dance dad.
That's 100% right. All right, final one here. Is Jake Ferguson a streaming tight end for the week? He usually is ranking outside of the top 12. His ECR this week is 14. Scott, you have him, I think, right on cue, but Fitzy, you've got him at 12. So Fitz, Ferguson, streaming tight end this week.
Yeah, I think you could stream him. And it's mainly matchup driven. The Panthers have allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends, and they've allowed a league high 10 touchdown catches to tight ends. Ferguson has played 3 games with Cooper Rush at quarterback. He missed 2 with a concussion, and really it's more like 2 games because one of those 3 games he sustained that concussion after only 7 snaps. So in those 2 games plus, he's had 8 catches for 67 yards. Not that impressive, but like there's not a lot of pass catching firepower on this Cowboys team other than CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, Brandon Cook's starting to work his way back in. But man, like this matchup does drive me to Jake Ferguson, who's been a pretty reliable tight end for the Cowboys in the past. Yeah, it hasn't looked great so far with Cooper Rush, but I wouldn't say that it can't in this plus matchup.
Scott, if you're staring at a guy like Pat Freiermuth, is Ferguson a streaming tight end you're getting over a guy like that?
Yeah, it's rare where Pat and I have a sharp disagreement, but I'm going to have it here. No touchdowns for Ferguson this year. I realize he's been hurt for a decent chunk of the season, and also 8.7 yards per catch. I need one or two things to work. I need the touchdown equity, or I need the ability of a splash play, or maybe even a quarterback to elevate you. He doesn't check any of those boxes right now. I get it. You want to gang up on Carolina, and I think Rico Dalla will do that. I think CeeDee Lamb will do that. Cooks did have a touchdown last week, so there's another mouth to feed. I just want – I don't mind going sight unseen on some guys, but Ferguson's just been hurt so much this year. Other Schoonmakers actually look pretty good. I think he's still going to have a role even with Ferguson back on the field. We saw that in the Monday night game. So Ferguson is somebody I'd have to really be in a pinch before I played him. You mentioned Freiermuth. He's an easy preference for me. Even something as ugly as Evan Ingram, the Jaguars, man, Mac Jones. I hate what he's doing to that offense. I hated what Trevor Lawrence is doing to it. I hated what Doug Peterson is doing to it. But Ingram, I could play over Ferguson. I could play Freiermuth over him. Even K. Dotton, who's become kind of unreliable of late, is somebody I have ranked above Ferguson.
A lot of tight end questions that are going to be out there. Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern. We got you covered. If you got more of them, you can literally throw your would you rather this tight end or this tight end, as we got the start and sit live stream on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasypros. So podcast listeners, you know what to do. Go and subscribe. Get notified. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the Week 15 tight end and quarterback ranks. Scott Pianowski, thank you for joining us all season long, my friend. We have thoroughly enjoyed you.
It's been a blast. Thanks so much for having me, guys. I've enjoyed these spots tremendously. I think it's helped me make better lineup decisions and give out better fantasy advice. I am not, I'll listen to anybody with a good idea, and you guys always have great ideas. So thanks so much for having me. And just Fantasy Pros, thanks for being a great place to get stats, to get data. I use it so much for my own mining because the way you present stats is really, really good. So it's along with Football Reference and some other websites. I think it's the indispensable source for information, and I'm just happy to be a small part of it.
Well, we love you. We love the audience. And for Pat Fitzmaurice, I'm Chris Welsh. You guys have a fantastic one, and good luck in those playoff runs for Week 15 right here on Fantasy Pros. We'll talk to you next time.